I'll meet other entrepreneurs who are like, what do you do for this? I'm like, I have no idea. What carrier do you use? I don't know. I think FedEx. I know FedEx is PillowCube.
Okay.
But I think that's another thing that as an entrepreneur, you just got to like really embrace, like, that's not me. I'm not process operations guy. And so the way that I am able to have multiple things is like, I very much delegate to people and just kind of let them do their thing.
Okay, let's start with the ice cream company.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. How did that come about?
So that was, we were in the startup building, and I was investing. I invested in like a food thing, a little snack company, and I was
What's
asking.
a food thing? What do you mean?
It was like we invested in this little protein bite company.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying.
And like it was like healthy snacks.
Right.
And they were having manufacturing issues, so I was asking around, and Anders was like, well, do you know Justin Williams who owns Rockwell's? And I was like, no. He's like, you should talk to him. So I started talking to Justin. And then me and Justin became friends. And I was always like, dude, how do you not have 100 stores?
Rockwell's is the best ice cream.
Dude, it's so good. Like,
it's literally like right over here.
Yeah. And I like New York, you go to New York, like nothing's even close. Yeah. In New York.
Yeah.
I mean, like
New York, dude.
The best food in the world.
I'm like,
it's insane.
New York's the greatest city ever.
No, it's so great. I love it so much. But it's weird that like you go to Chicago, same thing. It's like, and I think like Utah's contribution to the world is sugar, you know, our unique combos of sugar.
That's an interesting, because I've always wondered like what Utah's food is, right? Like as you go around and you travel the country, like you go to Wisconsin and it's like cheese and beer and like, have you ever had Wisconsin cheese curds?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Like the squeaky ones?
I would be 800 pounds if I lived in Wisconsin. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But anyways, all these areas have these other things, and I've always wondered what ours is. No, you've answered that.
Sugar.
It's sugar.
Yeah.
It's our
Dessert.
unique ability. You got Crumble, which is
wild.
An enormous company, right? And then Dirty Dough and all that type of stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. So you partner with Rockwell to do what?
So I basically said like, hey, let's launch a new brand. Let's keep Rockwell's. Let's not get rid of that. But let's launch a new brand that's D2C focused. Just focuses on kind of like giving him permission to do some of the wilder stuff too. Like Utah has a little more tamer palates.
Really?
You know, that's
in the ice cream world?
Well,
what's more intense in the ice cream world?
Well, I just think in general. That actually is a thing.
Really?
Yeah. Spiked.
Okay.
We were talking to a group in Texas that does like spiked milkshakes, and it's huge in Texas right now. It's going crazy. So they take really cool.
It is that.
Yeah.
You
so
are right.
I mean that, but like even just more. I think Utah. I mean, you see pizza here, and it's like, ooh, people always say, I don't like the burned parts, and you're like, that's not burnt. That's like char. You're supposed to have that. But I think in Utah, Justin has felt a little bit like, if I go too crazy, people kind of complain. They like more standard flavors. And I was like, dude, let's go crazy. Like, let's do. So he's just doing wild, like kind of, I would compare it to like really good family restaurant is kind of what Rockwell's is when it comes to ice cream. Like it's amazing, like high quality local place. And then we're doing kind of like Michelin star aimed flavors.
What's the name of the brand? So
it's called Cold Case Ice Cream. And it's all murder podcast themed. Really? So it's like all like detectives and Josh Falk's gone
smart.
Crazy. Yeah.
That's smart to build it around podcasts in particular. Like those are so popular.
Yeah.
Those like
they're so big
podcasts.
So it comes in this box. I'll send you one. And it comes with like games. Josh did a game that was like, who's
and for those who don't know,
sociopath?
Josh Falk is the greatest designer, and you stole him from us. So. And we're still not over it, dude. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't steal from us. Josh can do whatever he wants. And he's incredible. He's the most incredible designer. And he designed Cold Case, and he designs the Pillow Cube, and he designed, he's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But he's designed these ice cream packaging and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, the packaging. So you get this box, and you open it up. It's like these 6 wild flavors. And then it's... you get like a golden shovel spoon that's like that comes in an evidence bag. You get,
no way.
Yeah. Like Josh has gone crazy in a great way. Like he just knocked it out of the park. It's all gold foil. And then he did like a card game that's like, who's the sociopath in the room? Another card game like try and get, or not a card game, but a game like party game, like try and guess what's in the ice cream. What are the flavors? And so you use the spoon to like kind of dig up the evidence. And so it's just like the whole experience. People are like, will post on our social and be saying, even if the ice cream was bad, this would be the craziest experience I've ever had. Yeah. And then the ice cream is like wild. So one of the flavors was like pineapple and star anise base, which is like star anise is like...
What's star anise?
It's basically the black licorice flavor.
Okay.
So a little unpopular, but I'm not a huge black licorice fan. So good.
I love black licorice.
So if you like it, you'll love this ice cream. And then it's a blue Oaxacan cornbread with blue cornmeal with a brown sugar swirl.
This sounds wild.
So it's like, and people are like, that's so gross. That's going to be disgusting. And then every time people are like, dude, I've never had anything like that. It's insane. Wow. He has like a goat cheese one, which is based off of goat. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of lets him be, he's such a genius when it comes to flavors. I mean, he is insane. And he's done so many things that people don't realize. Like he's developed flavors and food and ice cream for other people. Some of those brands we already mentioned.
Yeah.
He did stuff for. So he just was that person who I'm like, dude, you are so freaking good at what you do. How do we get this to the whole world? And how do we just take this to the next level?
And how's it going?
Oh, it's been great. We're getting lots of celebrities and we have new videos coming out. You're the
master of this. How do you do all this? Okay, let's back up a little bit because you got the ice cream thing.
Yeah.
But we worked together at Izeni, actually. And you wasn't that like the dream team?
Dude, it's wild.
That was wild.
Me, you, Josh Falk. I mean, tons of developers who then went on to like the Gundys.
Yeah, some of the developers that have come out of there and built things. I mean, Divi was built inside there. It was crazy.
Divi. I mean, some of those guys are now the head of like dev at like Angel, Weave. I think there's a couple guys at Pattern now. Like, just wild group.
That was the dream team. Yeah. I don't think we knew what we had when we were there.
Like, everyone's like this. You always run into these kind of people.
So you leave Izeni and you start Creatably, right?
Yeah.
Which was like, what was that like an agency type of a deal or creative agency, something like that? Video?
Ad agency, I would say. It was kind of like this mix of ad agency, but then also using kind of my entrepreneurial kind of love just for like working with people. And I think we took this unique approach to most marketing ad agencies come in and they're like, we already have a bunch of ideas. Mm-hmm. And we took a very different approach where we would come in and say, I kind of have no idea what to do, but let's figure it out. And we created a process that would walk people through. And a lot of times we focus on business problems. So it's like, what's your biggest business problem? That could be acquisition cost is too high. Mm-hmm. We get a lot of that, or we're about to launch a new product and it needs to really kill it for the investors to see the potential of this product. It could be, we need to grow, we need to avoid decline, like all kinds of stuff. And so we combine that with kind of an advertising marketing bent. So we gave very actionable, like, okay, here's the problem we've now identified. Now here's the plan to how to execute. So that's where Creatably came in, and we got to work with great clients and help people scale and grow. And it was really fun.
It's probably fun.
It's still going. It's not.
No, yeah. It's super successful. So what's got to be incredible about Creatably, and we probably learned a little bit about this at Izeni as well, is like you're working with these companies. Like, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
I could build a brand. I could build a company, all that type of stuff. And so at what point, like as you're working with all these incredible brands and helping them be successful, you're like, why don't we just sell pillows?
Yeah.
Like at what point did you decide like, hey, let's start building our own thing here?
Yeah. So when I just told my wife like, hey, I'm going to go back out on my own again, she was like, very wisely, because she'd seen me and Josh and other people come up with tons of ideas and we were trying stuff and tinkering. And she was like, okay, when you leave, you can go do this, but you can do nothing else. Like no other side hustles, projects, nothing. Like Creatably is the only thing for 1 year. And that was kind of like her request. And it was great advice because it helped me hyper-focus. All I did that year was grow Creatably, and it really scaled and grew quickly. So it was kind of at the end of that year that I started to have that exact feeling. Like, this is pretty wild. And it wasn't a like I could do this better or anything. It was like, man, I really love the idea of having the ownership of a product and a brand, and we loved working with great brands, and like it was not in any way a negative emotion with our clients. It was much more a positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Of like, man, I love what you guys get to do
possible.
And what's possible, and I love product development. That's where I started my career. So it just kind of became this thing like, why don't we own our own? And then we'll also learn and I think become better because we'll empathize a lot more with our customers. We'll understand what they're going through, the challenges they have. So that probably became, it was probably like end of 2018, we started really talking about that. Mm-hmm. We started in end of 2017 was when Creatably started. And so we just started having that conversation, like what could we do? And we're just throwing out tons of ideas. And the Pillow Cube was an idea that I had as a kid and just kind of always sat in the back of the head and kind of always noodled on it. And finally got some samples of foam and I put them together and laid down, and I would show it to people. I had a seamstress make like a simple cover, and I would show it to people, and people would say, "That's the dumbest idea you've ever had."
That's cool.
I'm like, "Oh, cool. Interesting. Try it." And then they would lay down. They're like, "That's the greatest idea you've ever had. That's actually really great." And so I loved that contrast of like, it looked weird and silly, but when you tried it, it was actually like fantastic. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting. And then we just said, let's just kind of get this going. And I think one of the best things, or one of the key lessons I pulled from that, was that first year of Pillow Cube, we didn't have any employees. No one worked on it full time. Everyone at the agency just kept working for clients. And it was kind of like our pro bono client for 2 hours a week per person.
That's cool.
So everyone kind of like, hey, graphic design guy, you help do this, and, you come up with packaging. And it was just kind of like all the team was able to kind of like help and learn and grow. So it was really great. And that just kind of, and then we took all the money it was making and just reinvested it into the business.
Wait, but how do you make a pillow? Like, so you're like, hey, I'm going to create Pillow Cube.
Yeah.
And you're great at the branding and all, and marketing and all that type of stuff, which I want to get to. But have you ever manufactured something?
So I had started my career at Vivint doing product dev.
Okay.
And so a little bit, but it was hard. I mean, it's definitely not like, I was acting in a very different role. I was not, so it required going in like, hey, how do you make a pillow? Like I was at Vivint more looking at what was available and ordering. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh, we want, 2 of these, or we want this thing. And it was not something that we were manufacturing a lot of those early things ourselves. We were partnering with like Kwikset. So I was talking to Kwikset. And how do we integrate a Kwikset lock? So that was different. That was a big learning curve, and still something we're learning. I mean, it's. I feel like each industry you kind of go into is like, oh, now there's like all these different inputs and milk and cream, and that's different than foam. And
So where did you have to go? Did you have to go to China? Is it made here? I mean, I assume everybody who does manufacturing takes that obligatory trip to China.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We initially made it in China, and then over time, especially because of COVID, we kind of saw that like, hey, this is going to totally shift everything. We started making in the U.S. And so now our products are made in the U.S., Mexico, and China.
Oh, cool.
And so we've kind of split that up, tried to have some redundancy. Mexico is awesome. Like, people are fantastic. And each group kind of, has its different pros and cons. China's speed is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, you can send them a drawing on a notepad, and like 3 days later, you have a finished product. As long as it's not like molded. But if it's like, hey, I have an idea for a teddy bear, like 3 days later, you can have it.
Yeah. Did you run into supply chain issues during COVID
though?
though?
Luckily, the U.S. helped solve some of that, but there were issues. And it gets weird. Especially as you order more, you start running into like the foam chemicals in the U.S. are out. And you're like, what? They're like, no, literally, like we have no foam chemicals. The chemicals you make memory foam with we don't have enough.
Weird.
And so you just run into like, okay, well, when can we get some? It's like, well, 3 weeks. And so there was a point at Pillow Cube, like in that first year and a half, where we were just like calling up anybody. Like, I heard this group in Arizona has foam. Like, hey, do you have foam? Oh yeah, we do. Like we have 1,000 pieces. Okay, get those 1,000. Who else has foam? And we were just like kind of grabbing it from all over the place. So it was a pretty wild time. I think it was really, we hit it at a great time where we were small enough that we didn't get hit as hard as other people. And we were kind of scaling up. But yeah, we also avoided the whole 20, 21, 22 thing where boats are just sitting off the coast and you're like, well, I guess that'll
that was
never
wild.
come. Yeah. So insane.
How did you come up with the name Pillow Cube? I mean, it seems it's like a cube pillow, right? But
yeah,
I mean, your genius, one of your geniuses is branding and coming up with names like this. So what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes say that it was almost like no other better option. And I think the team's done a killer job of, I mean, we talked all the time. We came up with that. Damien on our team is like, he's so great at coming up with names and options for names. And so we would brainstorm. We call it name storming. And we would just come up with tons. And it was kind of like Pillow Cube just stuck. It was kind of like, okay, let's keep that as the current best option. And let's go find a way better option. And then we would come up with 1,000 more ideas. And just everything was like, well, that's, the domain's not available and it's $400,000 or, and so very quickly it was like, well, we have this domain and it's available and no one's used it before for a pillow. So I guess we just do that.
That's cool.
So it was interesting. That is a really hard part of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I'm always so impatient. I'm like, I don't know, just call it whatever. Like we were thinking of calling it masubi. Have you ever had masubi? It's like the Spam sushi thing that you get in Hawaii with Spam on top.
Yeah.
We were thinking of calling it masubi because it's kind of funny. Like, it's also a cube. But yeah, it's just, I feel like branding is so difficult because there is no perfect brand. Like anything you do, you pull in one direction and it naturally kind of pulls away the other. Like Pillow Cube is very descriptive, but because that it's harder to own. It's also, we've had to fight some of the trademark battles of like, we're now describing the category that we created, but there's a ton of people who are making cube-shaped pillows copying us. And so you have to fight some of those battles. So
isn't that weird?
It's weird.
When people start copying.
Yeah. Oh, it's strange. Like, oh, maybe that'll be my Wikipedia entry one day. That no one will care about, but me.
Wow.
The creator of cube-shaped pillows.
That's cool.
So, yeah, it's very fun.
That's actually way cool. How do you launch products?
Yeah, I have a pretty practical approach to doing that, and I think a lot of that came from Creatably. I think a lot of people, we dealt with clients and worked with people who at times would come in and be like, we've raised so much money, and we would eventually kind of hit a point with them like, do you know if anyone wants this? Like, you're making money, you have revenue, but you're spending $300 to acquire a customer that you're probably only going to make $150 off of in their lifetime. And maybe more, but that's pretty bad. That's a pretty rough start. And so I think that really formed in my mind this idea of like, every entrepreneur hates doing it. We all hate testing our ideas.
Yeah.
But you have to. So how do you do that as best you can so that you can kind of avoid a lot of these later problems of, being at a point where you've raised $40 million and you're like, I actually don't think anyone wants this. I think we're just bribing people with so much marketing that eventually enough people cave that we're making money, but we got to constantly raise money. So my approach has been very much focused. You should not raise money. Like the economic engine should work on itself or on its own. So you should have a product that when you take the cost of the product and the marketing overhead and profit, that unit economic situation works. And so as quickly as possible, I want to find out what that is. So kind of my first thing is, and this is my standard approach, is I try and create a prototype as quickly as possible, and then I tell people about it and show it to people and just kind of see what happens. Ice cream has been one of those where I would tell people about that, and then they would call me a month later and be like, dude, is the ice cream live? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
They're like, dude, you got to do it. And so that's always a good sign to me when I pitch other people and they never say anything, it's kind of a sign that it didn't really stick for them. When instead I tell people the idea and they're calling me up and like, dude, when are you going to do that? When are you going to do that? I'm like, okay, there's something, the idea has some stickiness. So that's kind of test one. Then test two is I try and get a prototype that's good enough that I can have people try it and kind of get some feedback. Like, and what I always do is I start with the negative feedback. Like, okay, you just tried it. I think it's too soft and I think the cover's not high quality enough. What do you think? And that kind of opens the door for them to kind of be like, one, sometimes people are like, no, you're being too harsh. Like, this is really great. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, they're not trying to appease me because I've already opened the negative door. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes they're like, yeah, you're right. Like, I would tweak this, I would change this, I would change this. And just really get that feedback of what needs to be improved.
How many people are you giving it to? Like, for the pillow, for example?
There's probably 50 people who tried it. Like, I would have them lay on it. And also, I think a lot of that is getting and developing that intuitive sense of like, I don't even need to ask that many questions, kind of watching them. Like I would kind of have friends over like, okay, this is the pillow idea I have, just lay on it. Tell me initial impressions. And, people would be like, I don't know, it's weird. It kind of looks funny. And then they would lay on it and I would just watch their face. Like, are they like, a lot of people would have like audible, like, whoa, or, oh man, that's really nice. Yeah. And looking for that, I think as an entrepreneur, you really have to have that intuition of, are people just BSing me or is this something they actually like? And so with PillowCube, it was really interesting because people had like this dislike from just pure visuals, or maybe not even dislike, but just, that's kind of weird. And then once they try it, they're like, dude, that's really comfortable. I can't believe how comfortable that is. So that's kind of the second test. And then the third test is I call the can I have it back test. So I made like 30 samples, 20 samples of PillowCubes, and I gave them to 20 friends and just said like, hey, just try this. And then I was trying to figure out like, I don't want to like ask them, like my mom, like, do you like it, Mom? And she's like, yes, I love you. So I decided and finally came up with this idea of like, why don't I ask for it back? Because if they're willing to just like immediately like, yeah, sure, take it back, then obviously they didn't love it that much. Yeah. And enough of those 20 people are like, no, I like can't sleep without this anymore. Yeah. Like I have to have this.
Oh, that's cool.
And so there were enough people, and even some friends were like kind of lying, like, I don't know where it is. I'm like, you lost it? And they're like, well, can I give it to you in like 2 more weeks? And I was like, okay, I'm onto something, because they don't want to give it back. Yeah. So then my final test after that one is always just as quickly as possible, can I get someone to pull out their card and give me money? Yeah. I've even done that. Like I've pitched strangers at malls before, like just walk up to them with a potential client and be like, hey, this is like, I own an agency. We're thinking of marketing this, wedding ring company. What do you think of this wedding ring? Would you buy it? Would you not? And see if I can get people to pull out money.
Interesting.
With PillowCube, we just did a Kickstarter, and so many people now use Kickstarter basically as just a pre-order. Mm-hmm. And they're spending so much money to get those orders. And we don't. We really use it as like, hey, we just did this for one of our other brands. We launched a new product on Kickstarter, and we just sent an email and a text to our existing audience and like, hey, do you want this? Here's what the product is. Go to Kickstarter. You can pre-order it, and same price as, or it's like a little discount, but not crazy, and you'll get it for Christmas. We had 20 grand in the first day. I was like, okay, that's a good sign that like we're not making crazy videos. We're not like super juicing the marketing. We're just trying to see if the concept itself stands on its own.
But how do you get the marketing going? Like with PillowCube, you build the product, people like it, right? But the hard part is getting people to know about it. Yeah. Yeah. And want to buy it. And like all of that type of stuff, right? How did you do that with PillowCube?
So with PillowCube, we did the Kickstarter, and that it didn't do. I mean, that's what's kind of wild to me sometimes with PillowCube. We did 40 grand. It wasn't like we made $5 million or right. It was like, as Kickstarters go, kind of like, that's okay. Nothing super exciting. Yeah. But luckily, and I think some of that was the way we'd done it, we really didn't understand Kickstarter, and so we just used it more as a test. But we built a video that really kind of sold that like pain point. And so we really focus on when we make content, like what's the pain that people are feeling? What's our solution? and then really kind of calling them to action to do something. So that's a pretty like simple breakdown of our videos. And so we made that video and just started running ad spend on it and seeing like, is anyone going to buy this? Run them into a Shopify site.
Do you run the ad spend on YouTube, Instagram? Like, what's a good platform for people who are trying to do this?
Yeah, I think if someone's starting, I would say Facebook and Instagram are really amazing. I mean, they just have an attribution model, so that's like tracking what's working, what's not working. No one's really come close. Like TikTok isn't close. They're getting better. YouTube is pretty great. Like YouTube can be a good option, especially if you have a more male focused product, because there's more
Isn't
men
that interesting?
on
It's like
YouTube.
male.
Oh yeah,
only males watch YouTube. Why would that be true? That's crazy.
Dude, it's such an interesting. There's so many things about platforms. I mean, this is a little of a of like a sideline, interesting idea, but a digression. That was the word I was looking for. But like YouTube, you want to make your marketing in a way that it focuses on the sound, because 70% of people who are watching YouTube have headphones in and sound on from the beginning. So with YouTube, we do audio hooks. So like a weird noise, something that kind of grabs attention, and then you have that 5 seconds of attention before they can hit skip. And so it's so different. Then Facebook is the opposite. 60 to 70% of people have their sound off. And so we're trying to do like visual, like some weird, thing going on that's like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah.
And it can be like completely unrelated to the video. It can be like Damien once did a video with like a cat scrolling on a phone. And it was like, wait, what is that cat doing? Like just weird stuff. So yeah, the platforms are super interesting. There's so much unique data. YouTube, for whatever reason, I think a lot of that's because it's like more gaming centric, sports centric, a lot of guys. So when we go YouTube, it's a little more like, okay, well, let's do the little more of the audio hook.
Yeah.
Let's try and focus on the messaging a little more male focused.
Is Instagram more female?
Yep, Instagram's more female.
Interesting.
Facebook is a pretty good kind of even split, I think. I'm not as much involved in that, but like at times has been much more, 10 years ago, Facebook was like college kids. Now Facebook is grandmas.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that shifts over time. TikTok is, right when it came out, was all kids. Now it's like, I think the average age is in the 30s or 40s. So stuff just changes, and that's what's hard about marketing. But yeah, so if someone's like, hey, I want to jump in, I always kind of recommend like start with Facebook. It's really easy to track. Someone watched it, they then clicked the link, then they bought. And so that allows you to start optimizing what's broken. So if someone watches the video, they watch the whole thing, they then don't click, or they do click and they go to your website and then they don't buy, usually it's like, okay, if at scale, if that's kind of what's happening for most people, something's wrong with our website. Then you fix the website and it's like, well, now everyone's going to the page, the product page, but they're still not buying or the conversion's low. So much of what we do is kind of, and this is our whole model, is using D2C because it's such a tight feedback loop and you have really good vision into what's going on, using that to solve all those things first before you go into wholesale. Wholesale is so difficult because you have so little contact with that end user. You sell it to Walmart and you're like, there's some pretty general data of like, what's the average person who shops at Walmart make, and is it men, is it women? But it's like very, very low. Facebook can tell me like, this is what this person likes and there's other products they bought and stuff like that. So they also listen to every conversation you have, so they can leverage that.
If someone's wanting to launch a consumer brand, and by the way, Utah's becoming like such a consumer state, like getting really, really good at this.
Yeah.
But if someone is wanting to launch a consumer product, consumer brand, or do the D2C model, how much should they plan on spending in order to figure all of that out?
I think that's a great question. Something that's really awesome, and it's something that I try and share with younger entrepreneurs. Consumer's really great because it's not the same hurdles as tech. my view is, and this is a little bit of like a soapbox issue for me, of like, I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we try and almost make it seem like, oh, that's so easy. And so sometimes like SaaS guys will be like, I wish I could just spend $100, make a prototype and go to, and already be making money. And I'm like, I wish my valuation was 1,000 times my revenue. So
I wish my product was just code.
Yeah.
Versus like a manufacturing thing.
But it's all hard. All entrepreneurship is hard.
Yeah.
But I think for younger entrepreneurs, consumer is really great because it leverages some of the things you have access to. It leverages some unique talents of younger people. They're younger. They're a little more hungry. They can do more legwork. You don't need tons of investor contacts. Like you can build a pretty good, I know so many people who started consumer companies with kind of like a $100 prototype, you know?
Yeah.
Thread is one of those.
Thread's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Colby and McKenzie are just the greatest. Gravel, they do an amazing toiletry bag. They started with just like something that I think they were in Vietnam and they like just went to a factory and had to make a sample. So that's where consumer is really great, is you can get going pretty easy. It's not super expensive. You usually don't need tons of investors, nor should you. Like I'm always telling people, had a guy call me the other day and I was like, dude, just get going. Like you're kind of wanting investors to make this really easy. And that would be easy if someone just gave you $500,000. But like you can do all this stuff. Like,
yeah, let's get rolling.
Build a prototype, throw it on Kickstarter, make 10 grand, leverage that into an order. So not crazy. Like nowadays, I mean, I'm trying to think of like when I did Color Run, and we were doing the videos, we could not find someone who had a drone. So we hired a helicopter for $2,500 an hour.
You did?
Yeah. So that was like the first video we ever did for Color Run. We hired a helicopter.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. Now you can buy a crazy drone for $800 and get way better footage than we could get because you can fly 5 feet away from people. So I always tell people, like, you want to do a consumer brand, the key thing is like get out there and test. Do that testing process because it's basically free, a couple $100, make a prototype, figure that out, and then throw it on Kickstarter. Like make your Kickstarter video with your phone. I think people don't really realize this, but one of the things I love about Kickstarter is they don't like the flashy, like I mentioned this earlier, that some of the things with PillowCube we kind of almost did wrong. We had this agency who was sitting around for a week and I said, let's make an amazing Kickstarter video. We still use that video. It's the one with the bearded guy. He was one of our team members. We still use that video. But when we did that on Kickstarter, people were like, why are you doing a Kickstarter? You have this video that probably cost you like $200,000. And I was like, well, it didn't, because we were just all sitting around and had the time. But the funny thing about Kickstarter is they like kind of more that like really raw. They don't want you to feel like you've raised tons of money.
Yeah.
They like funding the things that are kind of like the unique niche ideas. So that's what I always tell people, like film something with your phone, just you sitting there, tell people why they should care about your product. Get going.
Interesting.
Make a prototype for $100, and even if it's not perfect, just get going down the road. So
I don't know that people realize how successful PillowCube is.
It's probably bigger than most people realize. I think it's definitely
crazy what you built here. How does that feel? I mean, would you have ever thought it would blow up in the way that it has?
Oh no, like early days, I was saying to people, I'm like, man, if we could just ever sell this for like $5 million, that would be absolutely bonkers. Then we did $4 million our first year in revenue. And I was like, what the freak? Like I thought this would take 10 years to get to the point of selling it for $5 million. So it's been really fun to see. And there's been so many ups and downs. Like you have to learn. And that, I think so much of entrepreneurship is persistence. It's just willingness to be uncomfortable, keep working, keep trying, keep testing. But yeah, like I think I've tried to take that approach is like, man, any outcome of this is like amazing. Even not even just speaking financially, just like it's been such a fun, crazy experience.
Yeah.
Really kind of like pinch myself all the time of like, I get to work with people I love. that I love collaborating with and coming up with new stuff. And it's like, this is pretty wild that this is our job. Sometimes it feels like we're just a bunch of kids having fun.
That's the best job.
So
that's when it's the best. I'm sure you're getting offers for people to buy it. Like what are your plans with it?
Like my approach has always been to just build something awesome. And that, I think as soon as you start trying to engineer too much, it kind of becomes counterproductive of like, let's do this. And so my approach is just, let's keep making great products that really focus on side sleepers and our customer base. And who knows what will happen. I mean, it's definitely not a great acquisition time right now. So it's kind of makes it a little easier to just be like, well, no pressure. This probably isn't a great time anyway. So let's just focus on kind of hitting those next goals. But like we're launching in Walmart. We're talking to a bunch of other big retailers. So it's been super fun. Yeah.
Walmart's huge.
Yeah. Walmart's going to be pretty crazy.
Wow. Getting in there. That's super incredible. How do you think about pricing? Like where do you land on, because I'm sure there's a million ways you could price these things. You could sacrifice some quality. You could do all these different things.
Yeah.
How do you land on like, this is the level of price? We're going to be a premium product. We're going to be a middle. I don't know what they're all called, right? But how do you land on pricing? How do you think about it?
No, it's great. I think this is something that's been really good for Pillow Cube, and we've learned so much just this year. I think that like a lot of times entrepreneurs focus a lot on the competition, and I feel like that can be too much, but I think what we started to realize this year is we started to just look at the industry a little more and try and pull more data on like, where's the volume? A lot of this came from Walmart. We were having discussions with Walmart about products, and we would kind of naturally like, I definitely lean high. I'm a little more like, I don't want to go immediately to the bottom of the bucket. Especially because Pillow Cube is an innovation, and we focus on innovation and IP. And so we don't want to immediately always go like, let's just go super cheap. But Walmart was really awesome. They are also not that, like, they're not like, let's just try and get it as low as we humanly can.
Yeah.
But they take a very good like science data backed approach of like, okay, let us show you something that we priced at $24.99, and then we priced it $19.99 and got 10 times the volume by dropping the price at $5. And you're like, interesting. Yeah, that would be nice. And so they've been amazing in kind of helping us to see like, hey, they were about to take the original Pillow Cube, the Pro is what we called it. We've rebranded it, but it's called the Side Cube now. They were going to take it like 110, 120. And then they started to say like, hey, I think one of your guys' opportunities is you don't really have anything in the mass market. Almost all your products are luxury. And that embedding for pillows is kind of like 100 and up. So they started to say, most people, most brands, bedding brands have something in the $70 to $90 range. And that's kind of like their mass pillow. It's a nice pillow. It's not like the $20 just, kind of cheap fill, my pillow kind of thing. And so we started to realize like, okay, like part of our opportunity or something we need to realize is you need to break into buckets, kind of like here's the luxury price. And so whatever industry you're in, I think it's important to be aware of what your competitors are doing, how you stack up to them. There's a great quote by Elon Musk where he says that most entrepreneurs just kind of put their head in the sand and are like, I'm so much better than my competitors. And he's like, anytime I get into any industry, the first thing I do is I go buy my competitors' products and really be honest in how they're doing. And so I think that's really great. Like, it's really good for us to say like, hey, you were considering us and one of our competitors. Why didn't you go with us? Or why did you go with us?
Yeah.
What were the reasons? And so I think so much of entrepreneurship, we're asking customers the wrong things. Like, I never ask customers, what do you want us to develop in the future? It's like, well, you're not a product developer. That's not your job. But when you don't buy, it's a great thing to ask them, like, why didn't you buy? Like, what stopped you? I had someone the other day who's like, hey, my friend was looking at you and then one of your competitors, he went with you guys. I was like, oh, I want to talk to that guy. And just ask him a bunch of questions. What were the key considerations as you made that decision? So I think that's important for entrepreneurs. I notice a lot of young entrepreneurs immediately, they have the innovative product. It's a better version. Like it can be super disruptive, and then they just naturally go to, and we're half the price. I'm like, what? Why are you half the price? Like you have, I actually met a couple entrepreneurs the other day at BYU, and I was like, man, they got everything. It's super disruptive, like way better product. And I misjudged them and was like, they're going to price this thing at like, and so they were saying most things on the market are like 25 and we're going to go 40. And I was like, oh, great. I was like, you guys are super smart, because most people would go, and we're going to go 15.
Yeah.
Like, why? You have the better product. Yeah. So I think that that's something that's important to look at. You have to kind of know what's out there. You have to understand that. You have to understand volume. When we took that price, that really helped. When we made that price shift for that main pillow, cool. You go from 110, 120 to 70. A lot of Americans. And I think that's something that naturally as an entrepreneur, you have to be very empathetic, that sometimes as entrepreneurs, because we love products and it's something we're willing to spend money on, we think that everyone in the country is willing to spend $180 on, on a watch, or $1,000 on a watch, or whatever it is. So you have to really understand that. And Walmart, like I said, they've been great because they've just shown us real data. So
that's super interesting. How hard have you studied Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy?
Oh man,
that's like your big competitor, isn't it? I don't know.
I mean, definitely not as much now. I mean, he's in a tough spot.
Yeah, he's always.
I've definitely learned. This has always been my approach.
Why don't you just start getting into elections and getting into politics and stuff? You could be like there was that Parkland guy.
Yes, good pillow.
Is that still going?
No.
The pillow politics is actually pretty funny.
It's kind of wild. What's so funny is Pillow Cube. My approach to this is always, I highly encourage people to be involved in politics, get involved in your local community. I personally do not believe businesses should take political stances because, and this is the reason is I have Democrats who work for me, I have Republicans who work for me, and I don't want to take a stance and then assume that all my employees agree.
Yeah.
And so I try and take more of a stance of like, hey, as a brand, we don't have politics because our individual people may have different politics than us. And so we try and be very supportive. We don't punch down. We don't mock people. We don't, ever, I mean, obviously as a brand, you never should be racist. You should be supportive of all people. But I think too many brands are like, we got to make a political statement. And that's where Mike Lindell was just such an idiot. I was like, dude, you're like making this political statement for My Pillow and have ruined your entire company by it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just last week, there was a big news article that they're selling all their equipment off because they need it to pay the settlement. I mean, they're like screwed. And again, I just think
because like he was like involved in like,
he lost the suit against what is that group?
Dominion.
He lost, I think, $2 billion settlement. Pillows isn't that big of a business. And so
can you imagine if you were like the voting machines don't work, like you pillow guys tell us that?
I didn't know that the Pillow Group had such insight into the political workings of the U.S. No, and I just think I think too many brands, they get too political, and it very rarely works. And again, I'm not saying that like as a company we want to support equality, we want to support good ideas, and sometimes good things can veer into politics that I don't think should be politics. Like taking care of people, treating women and men equally, like that's just good business because you're taking care of your people. But sometimes like him, like, why are you commenting on the U.S. voting system? Like you have no expertise there and your business is not related to it. And so now you've just put your business at risk because you're talking about stuff that you really like. If they asked me to talk about like U.S. China or U.S. Mexico trade relations, maybe you want to make a statement on that. But so anyways, I just think it's something that is so risky. It has gone so awry for him. And it's been kind of fun to just sit back, but we have gotten so many emails. I mean, I have so many hilarious emails from just mostly super right wing, like ultra right, that thinks that the Pillow Cube was started by the CIA.
What?
As a way to overthrow Mike Lindell.
What?
And I'm like, what are you talking about? No joke. I have like the craziest emails. Like, this is like the Democratic Party. You're funded by them. You got money from them because you guys are. And I'm like, we've never made a comment on him. Like, this is probably the most I've ever said about Mike Lindell publicly. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I guess it's because our brand is kind of fun and out there.
Yeah, like why? Like, yeah, it's so funny. You get into a category where someone in a major player is political. You kind of, I guess, receive that whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Like the weirdest thing ever is that pillows would be political. That would make no sense at all. But because of Mike Lindell, it is like somewhat political. And that, the guy who said like, hey, we're going to be the left wing version of this.
Yeah.
Which I thought was just almost crazier. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not buying a pillow based on your politics. Is it good?
Well, and I think his challenge is he had a bunch of ideas that he threw out that were like, that's just not realistic. Like, you can't pay. And this is where like business can be really tricky and hard with politics sometimes, because his ideas were like, we're only going to hire union workers. All the materials are going to be sourced in the U.S. and made in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. You have to do that if you're him.
And it's just kind of like, hey, we make it in the U.S. and we've figured that out. But over time, like, you realize like that's really hard. Yeah. No one wants to pay $400 for like a pillow made of polyfill.
Yeah.
But that's what you would have to charge if you're going to do all the political things he was saying he was going to do. Like, I'm going to, donate 25% of profits to these groups. And it's like, dude, you don't understand. You're not a business at that point. You're a nonprofit. Yeah. So if you're going to be a nonprofit, great. So I think it's much better, and there's so many great examples of this. Like Davis Smith, I think at Codapexy does such a great job of like, they're a great business who also cares about people, who also is very neutral politically. Like they're not out there being, talking about the U.S. voting system, but he like cares about people. He helps people. His like wants to make the world a better place through capitalism. And that's what I try to personally like. I'm going to use my skill sets and talents to help others, to give a great wage to my employees.
Yeah.
But I'm also not going to try and get into things that I have no business being in. So,
and it would probably be like a drain on your, not even just your time, just mental drain.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like how much time he's thought about that versus just like, how do I build this company?
Yeah.
Which again, like if he wants to, maybe he wants to run for president. Like again, that's just a completely different thing.
Yeah.
It's a completely different field. It's
Which
not.
I just remembered, this is an idea that I learned from the mayor of Provo at the time.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
No, tell me.
Me and you went, and I think Josh, when we were at Izeni, we were like going to do this whole TV show.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? And we got like the VW bus.
Yeah, I do remember that.
We were going to interview people, and John Curtis was the mayor of Provo at the time, and we filmed this whole like TV episode of you hanging out with him talking about stuff. And one of the things he said, which I loved, he was like, so many times business people get involved in politics and they try to turn the government into a business. Mm-hmm. And he's like, there's ways in which the government should be more like a business, and there are other times where the government needs to take care of people in a way that doesn't make sense from a profit standpoint, from a business standpoint, but makes sense as a government taking care of people or helping people or encouraging. Just like, parks don't make sense. This free thing that's just beautiful sitting in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
But it makes us all happy and have a place to go. And so I loved that lesson from John Curtis. That was like at lunch at Station 22. We were just
I forgot. Did we ever release that?
I don't think so.
I don't think we did.
I don't think we ever
spent
did.
a whole day with him. I should apologize. But he's actually been right where you are like a week ago. I interviewed him, and now he's a congressman. But yeah, I should apologize. Like, we took a whole day. I'm like, see you, dude.
Sorry.
Thanks for the footage.
Dude, we should. It was great. He is such a great person, and I learned so much. But that was something he talked about. I was like, that's a really good point. Like, we need to recognize that government isn't business and business isn't government, and they each have their own role. And I think like Davis makes a great example of this, is like capitalism should be something that helps people, not hurts people. Mm-hmm. But it's not government, and you have to run it differently. So
is your model with Creatably like, hey, the agency is going to help fund our products we spin out now? Is that part of the idea or no?
Not, I think it was at one point. Like at one point we're like, let's make this an incubator. And what eventually happened is Creatably kind of became the servant of everyone, and it didn't really allow it to be a great agency. And so we eventually said, let's make an incubator that's separate, and Creatably is just an agency. It's not going to fund all these new ideas. Then it's like never making money. It's shareholders. So kind of a similar, like it became almost like, let's just fund everything from this. And it's like, okay, that doesn't really make sense. So Creatably still does, like, we have people pitching. I talked to someone today about, hey, we'd love for you to come in as investors and do a campaign for us, and part of your profit goes towards equity. So we do that at times, and we look at that. But I wish I'd had the bigger vision from day one, because now it's like we've had to work through some of those challenges of like, oh, we should have built a parent org from day one. We should have had a parent org from day one. The brand should have owned the parent org, or the parent org should have owned all the brands, owned all the service providers. So it just has made it a little messier and take a little longer from a legal standpoint. But
that gives me the biggest deja vu. Remember when we were in Izeni and we were, I don't know how many meetings we had about this exact thing.
Oh, yeah.
Should we fund it out of Izeni? Should we create a different company? And it, like, to the point where it's like we were all just like, all right, who knows? Let's just keep doing what we're doing.
Let's just do something.
This is way crazy.
Yeah.
Right. And this is actually somewhat complicated. So
you can get to a point where you start building the country before you've ever built a city. And I think we got a little, and we'd fall into that trap too. Like you can have times where you're like, and I think entrepreneurs are very susceptible to that. They're like, I'm going to build 50 businesses. And it's like, just build one business. Yeah. And again, going back to my wife's very wise advice and requirement rule, whatever you want to call it, of like, why don't you just go build one thing and get it making us money and something that can provide for our family. And then once you've done that, then you can go do something else.
Focus is super important. Dude, you can get lost, right? Every time I've gotten lost in my career, it's been because, now we're just going to do everything.
Yes.
And it's like, that's cool for a second. And then you got to do everything. Yeah. And it actually sucks.
One of the biggest things I go back to in my career, one is everything's a bell curve. Yeah. Everything in life is a bell curve. Yep. But one of the other big ones is just leverage. Kind of always asking myself, like, do I have the leverage? And I think that shifts, and that's shifted for me. Like, sometimes people are like, oh, you're just starting a million things. I'm like, no, I kind of went down that road where we had so many new ideas once PillowQ was taken off. Like, let's do 100 new companies a year. Or one time I was even proposing, let's start a new business every quarter. And now it's like, we might start a new thing like every year, maybe every 2 years, because we've just learned that leverage, that lesson of like, do I have the leverage to start another thing? Do I have the resources?
And you have to do it. Like it's no small thing to start something, right? And if you have other responsibilities already, like Creatably or an agency or all these different things, you still got to run that thing too. Yeah. Right. Like it's really easy to like get in front of a whiteboard, right? Yes. Like this is what we could do. And this, and it's like super fun. And everybody's way excited. And then you go away. It's like, how the hell? But we all have day jobs. Yeah. We all have like actual things we got to do too. And so I don't see how that would work, but it looks good on the whiteboard. Yeah. I think that's a difference. And it's, again, pros and cons. You get like someone who's a little older in their career and they start being like, I say this to entrepreneurs all the time, like, there's a bunch of ideas I don't know that I'd go after. But I'm like, maybe I'm too scared. When I was in college, I was like, I'm going to raise money for a tech idea. And I'm like, I don't know any programmers. I don't know any investors. Yeah. Didn't really have the resources. Yeah. That's one of the things I've said about like here in Utah. I think we should leverage and lean on what we're the best at rather than trying to become Silicon Valley. Yeah. Like if I'm a BYU student, I'm probably not trying to build the next Facebook. Yeah. I'm trying to build the next place for that. LinkedIn, the next Pattern. Yeah. The next Route, the next whatever it is. Qualtrics, Salesforce, those types of companies are what we're good at. Consumer. We have a great consumer community. The consumer is crazy how good we are at that in Utah. Yeah. But consumer tech? No. I don't think I would start it here. I would move to San Francisco because you need that ecosystem and that infrastructure. Like maybe we'll get there. And so huge props to the people who are willing to go against what I'm saying and do it. Go ahead. Yeah.
But that's just, I think you kind of learn and you start to get older as an entrepreneur and you start to say, there's some ideas. And that's even people are like, man, you have so many brands. I'm like, I really don't. I have a bunch of product lines.
Yeah.
Because they're all consumer. They're all like needing the same people. They all need like kind of the same skill set. We're doing a lot with shipping. We're doing a lot with like supply chain.
Has that been fun to figure out, like the whole shipping and manufacturing and
for the people I assigned it to? I think
they having fun doing it.
Yeah.
No, it sucks, dude. Why'd you assign us it?
Like, you guys go figure it out. That is definitely the part of the business that I'll meet other entrepreneurs who are like, what do you do for this? I'm like, I have no idea. What carrier do you use? I don't know. I think FedEx. I know FedEx is PillowCube.
Okay.
But I think that's another thing that as an entrepreneur, you just got to like really embrace, like, that's not me. I'm not process operations guy. And so the way that I am able to have multiple things is like, I very much delegate to people and just kind of let them do their thing. And like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I mean, even cold case, like I'm really the vision of where I think that should head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not day to day. I have partners who do that. I'm really like, here's where I think we can innovate and be unique. But I'm not like running that company. Like, I have no idea how we're doing shipping. I have no idea how we're buying like machinery.
Wait, are they buying it off like the website?
Oh yeah.
Oh, so
it's like shipped to your house.
Okay.
With dry ice in it.
So that actually is like a pretty big problem that you're not
that someone else has solved.
Someone shipping ice cream.
Yeah.
I guarantee they figured that out now. But yeah, that's
oh yeah. The first like we did 100 tests with like friends and influencers. Like a third of them were melted. Yeah. Because you just learn all kinds of stuff. And you know, I do remember having a lot of conversations when we were doing that of like, you know, this carrier says 2-day, but they don't guarantee it. So like UPS says a 2-day and you pay tons of money for that 2-day, but they don't guarantee 2-day.
Yeah.
And actually their hit rate is pretty low. So we were paying for 2-day for every single one, but like a big chunk of them weren't showing up. So we started reaching out to other frozen food companies like, hey, who do you use? And they're like, oh yeah, don't use that group. That group's rough. So it is interesting. But yeah, I think that's something I think that's definitely like something I've developed over time. I'm just not a micromanager.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes to a fault, and many times to a fault. Like I'm like so hands off and like, yeah, you're not going to like people who want to work somewhere and have a lot of
ownership and freedom
are going to love it.
Yeah.
People who hate ambiguity, who want like clear, concise, everything kind of detailed out, you're going to hate it.
Yeah.
You're going to hate like, and we've had people quit who are like, dude, you're just like so vague. I don't know, figure it out. And they're like, but what? I don't know. Figure that out too. Just figure all of it out.
How many products do you have now? You got the pillow, you got the ice cream.
PillowCube, and PillowCube has a bunch of products under it.
Well, let me ask you about that real quick because I was wondering about that. So when you landed the name PillowCube, you kind of pigeonholed yourself for
a little bit
pillows, right? But just like Mike Lindell, who you've learned so much, you can do other things besides pillow, even though
he
pillow
sells
is
towels.
in your name. Yeah, he sells towels and all this type of stuff. And so were you thinking about that when you were branding? It's like, hey, if we call this thing PillowCube, we might be pigeonholed to only be able to sell pillows and maybe pillowcases.
Yeah. I wish we were that smart. I think we were like, oh, I love PillowCube and it's really fun. And who knows if this is even going to work.
Yeah.
And then later we did start to be like, oh, crap. Like, can PillowCube release a mattress? Do we need to call it like Mattress Cubes? We own that domain because we started to be like, yeah, maybe we do.
Yeah.
And then we launched it just to see. And that's kind of my default is I'm always like, ready, shoot, aim. Like, well, I don't know. We'll try it and see what people say. And no one was freaking out about it. They're like, oh, that's fine.
Well, we get too hung up on that. It's like, I know particularly, I used to always get really hung up on, well, if we call it this, then what if we wanted to do this 5 years later?
Yeah.
And I was like, shut up. Like, you're not even going to do that.
Yeah.
Why worry about like 5 years later?
I think that goes back to like building the country. It's like, I don't know. We haven't even launched this thing. So let's get this launched.
It's like, slow down, guys. If this is super successful, it's going to trip us up 5 years from now. Like, we're not even going to be in the same room with each other 5 years from now.
That's the likelihood. Most startups never get past the come to terms on what each person gets. So yeah, like I think that we definitely had to like over time be like, well, and I mean, Pillow Cube's been like the constant. I even said this about, we originally called the wider pillow the Pro. Now it's called the Side Cube. Because we just realized that so often we would name something and people would be like confused. And so I think it's really good to, again, as executives, I really want the executives to like call people. I get into Facebook chat to just see like, what are people saying? What are people complaining about? What questions do people have? Because that's great when people are like, what's the difference between the Pro and the Classic? I'm like, how? Oh, great. We suck.
Price.
We gotta do better. And so when people are confused.
What if you just said price? One's more money.
One's more money.
What do you want?
Yeah. Did you want to pay 70 or 120? But I think that's like it's a really important thing. And that's a natural thing I've seen with the company is as you grow bigger and bigger, you can kind of insulate yourself. Get to a point where you never talk to customers because you're like, in those early days, you're helping fulfill orders. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, we have a 3PL staff and we have customer service team and we have an ops team. And you can get to a point where you never run into that. And so I try to do my best to like talk to customers, jump on calls, call people up. Like one of the partners, when we started Mattress, he just started calling every single person who bought a mattress. Because he was over that campaign and that growth.
You know what's interesting? That's so simple and obvious.
So simple.
And so rare.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I've started to notice more entrepreneurs that I talk to are like, give themselves a quota of like, call 5 customers a week. And when you have thousands of customers coming in each week, it's really easy to just be like, I don't need to do that. Who cares?
Yeah.
5 is such a small number. It's kind of anecdotal. It's like, no, but it's great to just so often, and we do that all the time. It's shocking to me. You launch something and you're like, oh my gosh, everyone's thinking of it differently than how we thought of it. And that's something I learned at some of those early jobs where it would be kind of a group similar where we're sitting in there like, how do you structure this kingdom from day one? And I saw that at some of the other places where we would kind of sit as a executive team or management team and try and predict and know everything. Yeah. And I'm like, how about we just launch this thing and see what people say?
Yeah.
Like, let's let our actual customers and users give us feedback.
Have you ever done the opposite where you've launched too fast? Just because I've done that. Like I got to a point where I was like, particularly like at Izeni, where we were working on so many different things. Like, should we take equity? Should we take money? Like, should we build this? And like all the whiteboarding stuff. I got to the point where I'm like, F this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start everything.
Yeah.
Any idea I have, I'm just going to launch it publicly. Right.
Yeah.
And just put it out there. That's like, you probably shouldn't do that either.
Yeah.
Easy.
No, I think that's kind of where I like that process where you're like, okay, talk to some people, see if the idea sticks. But I mean, we've had a bunch of stuff that like we did a survey with customers where 70% of them said they wanted us to make a sleep supplement. We're like, oh, great.
Interesting.
Crazy. So we launched it and it didn't like fail, but we didn't sell. 70% of customers weren't buying it. And so then it just went through the hard work of like, oh, now we got to optimize it and change it. I think one of the best examples of that, we did a kid's pillow called Pillow Cubs and launched on Kickstarter, did almost $100,000. People loved it. And then we went to like sell it on our website and like couldn't really sell it. COGS had come in a lot higher than we expected. We had some issues with our supply chain that we had to fix. And so we were selling it for like $60, $70. And parents are like, look, I'm not paying $60 for a freaking kid's pillow.
I'll pay $200 for my own pillow. My kids, $10. Who cares? They're sleeping on the floor anyways.
Yeah.
They're lucky if they get a blanket.
Yeah. Scoliosis, who cares? No, but it's true. Like kids they're not old and their bodies don't hurt yet. And so they're not like super picky. So we would get the parents every once in a while who are like, that's the cutest thing we ever saw. So we just went to parents and said, you know, where'd we miss? They're like, price is too high. It's bigger than it needs to be. So that actually made it easy because they're like,
interesting.
You made it like 12 by 12. And when you open it up, it's like a little mouth that like opens up. And they're like, doesn't need to be that big. Some of the characters are too complex. Like it could be simpler. We did these really plush fabrics that are like so amazing. And the parents are like, that's really hard to clean. Like, especially moms.
Yeah.
Hey, that's really hard to clean. I don't really like that. Can you do that fabric that's like on Squishmallows that's like this tall. You're like, yeah, that's 10 times cheaper. Of course we could do that. But again, it's just kind of like a bunch of decisions we made thinking this is what customers want.
This is what they want, yeah.
And I do think in that case, like, man, we could have done focus groups with 50 people. Like, we had hundreds of thousands of customers at that point. We could have gotten 100 people in Utah to come give us this feedback, moms especially. And we should have done that first. But like we were able to learn and develop that. But I think that is, again, it's so easy to sit in a room and be like, no, everyone wants this and they're willing to pay for it because you've been drinking the Kool-Aid and you've been indoctrinated. And so as a parent now, I'm willing to pay a lot for my kids' sleep because I've learned all the dangers of like, if they sleep incorrectly, what will happen down the road. But your average consumer doesn't care and hasn't been through that experience. And so you got to be aware of that.
It's like seeing a kid who is wearing Jordans, like Air Jordan shoes.
Yeah.
And like 6 months from now, they're not going to fit.
Yeah.
And you're like, those parents are cool.
Yeah.
I've always been very envious of those parents.
Yeah.
Where they're like, wow, like that 6 months means a lot to you.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
There's something really interesting about that. The psychology of like, I'm going to buy $100 pair of sneakers for my kid that there's no chance in hell they can wear like by the time school starts or something like that.
Yeah. It's wild. Well, and the other thing is, and this is, I think, an interesting example with that is I'm shocked how many 10-year-olds are like, are those real Jordans you're wearing? Because mine are fake. And I'm like, really?
Really?
So many kids buying them off Chinese knockoff websites.
I wish
so the
that would have existed when I was a kid.
I know. Seriously.
Would have
The
been so
parents
cool.
are really wearing real Jordans and the kids are wearing knockoffs because they've kind of said like, not really. But you do have kids who are wearing the real Jordans.
Yeah.
And that's something I think is like so fascinating. And again, goes back to everything's a bell curve.
Yeah.
Adoption of products is always a bell curve. And so I think the greatest marketing book maybe of all time is Crossing the Chasm. It's this idea that like in the early phases of that bell curve, it's early adopters and fast followers. Mm-hmm. And then you have this chasm between fast followers and the masses. And most brands get it wrong and they're never able to cross the chasm into the masses.
Yeah.
And so that was like kind of a Pillow Cube where all of a sudden it was like Walmart being like, you guys kind of don't have a mass product.
Yeah.
Like, I know you guys think everyone, and we did a lot of marketing. Like, I know it's an expensive pillow, but if you're willing to spend $150 on a pair of Jordans, the thing you lay your head on every night for 8 hours, you should be willing to spend more than $30. And we really hit that message hard. And at some point, it's kind of like, yeah, people just are not going to buy this whole message. They're just not willing to. They're like, yeah, I'm not spending $180 on my pillow. I'm like, okay, well, can we create something that solves kind of different problems for different people and have something that hits like the lower end market, the middle market, and the high end market, the luxury market? And so I think that that's something as a entrepreneur, and I think this is definitely something we're seeing. E-com in the consumer world has been so focused on tactics, like how do you buy media, are you using Facebook? We sometimes forget the bigger strategic decisions of, do you have products that serve every part of the market?
Yeah.
What are the bigger things you're going to do that separate you from your competitors? How do you differentiate yourself? We've focused on side sleepers, not intentionally. We just thought early on that was like the forgotten group because it felt that way. As a side sleeper, I was like, why does no one make a great side sleeping pillow? You find pillows that they say, this one's pretty good for side sleeping, but it works for everything. And so I just got frustrated by all these products that they were trying to appease everyone. And I said, I just want a pillow made just for side sleepers, not anyone else, just side sleepers. And I didn't realize until later when a chiropractor was like, that 70% of Americans are side sleepers, right? Because you guys talk about like, all your marketing's like, we're the forgotten minority and we're the oppressed.
The overwhelming majority.
And he's like, no, everyone's a side sleeper. And he's like, but brilliant on your part because you like made everyone feel like this victim of the bedding industry who got screwed. And he's like, you are, because they never made a product specifically for that group, but it's not this very small portion. And so strategically, we've leveraged that to say, we're going after side sleepers and only side sleepers.
Yeah.
And then every other bedding company, you guys can fight over the remaining 30%. And we'll take the 70 and we'll focus on them. And so, but that's a big strategic decision.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as startups, we get too hyper-focused on the tactics.
Yeah. So much of marketing seems to be about human psychology.
Oh, yeah.
And like what drives someone to make the decisions they make? Like what drives a parent to buy the way expensive Jordans that their kid's definitely going to, or like what drives a person not to go to the doctor when they probably should go to the doctor?
Yeah.
Like the human psychology of stuff like why is so fascinating. If you can land on the why though and really nail it, I mean, you've got a huge company though.
And that's again going back to how we both are always like, oh, I want to jump into that thing. Yeah. I think that's why I struggle with that.
Yeah,
because you can tell me about any industry. I had someone come in and talking about weight loss drugs and pills, and it was just a doctor just saying, here's why the industry is the way it is, and I'm like, I am fascinated by this. This is so interesting. Like, here was this craze, and we got into the, what was it, ephedrine or whatever it was.
Oh yeah.
And then we shifted to this, and now we're on Ozempic, and this is how we got here. Yeah. And I am just like, oh my gosh, this is so fascinating how humans work and think.
Yeah.
And how you sell weight loss as a product in an industry. And so that curiosity can be dangerous for me of like, okay, you don't need to jump into every single industry just because you're fascinated by it. But it really is fun to see how human beings work and why they do the things they do. It's just wild.
Well, it's the human psychology of it too, right? Like when I first heard about Ozempic, I'm all easy, sweet.
Yeah.
Now I don't have to do the obvious thing is go for a walk, dude.
Yeah.
And just try not to eat too much throughout the day.
Yeah.
But like, no, I just want that pill and that'll do it. Right. Yeah. And then I don't have to do any of this other stuff.
Yeah.
The psychology of that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
And that they're going to be an enormous company, these people behind Ozempic and all that stuff. When really all you'd have to do is go for a walk.
Yeah. Well, and I think
better for your mental health. It's, like stuff like that. It's interesting.
And there's almost a choice there. I've talked to so many people who are like, man, you can sell anything. I'm like, really? I don't. My secret hack is I only sell great products, because then it kind of becomes this like virtuous cycle. Like we've never taken on clients who are like, hey, this is a crappy product, but who cares? Because people will buy it. I'm like, I don't like that. So it's kind of like we joke that's like our secret sauce is we find people who have phenomenal products, and then we get behind them and give them great marketing because the two build off of each other.
Yeah.
And so Creatably's had a great track record of choosing stuff. Like we were working on Kizik 5 years ago.
Really? Early on?
Really early. Like we did a Kickstarter for them that was like really early. We launched Gab Wireless. And all of that came from this model we came up with of how do you find great companies? What are the key characteristics that are common amongst great companies? And so I think that's something that like it's important to, I don't know. For me, I just am not willing to sell garbage.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Isn't it interesting that you could launch a brand new shoe company in, what was it, like 2018, 2019 or something?
Yeah.
And it's actually like blowing up.
Dude.
I mean, you would imagine like, if people got shoes figured out.
Yeah.
No need to even go on that market. But Kizik's actually, I mean, I have like 5 pairs of these things.
Yeah.
They actually are better.
Oh, they're fantastic.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And what was also funny, it was really early on, because I mean, Mike and that whole team was working on that 10 years ago, maybe longer at OGO. And it was funny, when we were involved in 2018, you would do marketing and people are like, this is so dumb. Americans have gotten so, like, it was hard to convince people it was a good idea. Like, this is a stupid product. Why don't people just tie their laces, lazy idiots? And you're like, what is going on? But again, everything's a bell curve. And so in the early days, you got those early adopters, and they were people who had medical issues, people who really was hard to tie your shoes.
Yeah.
And then over time, that just idea became more mainstream. PillowCube's gone through a very similar thing where early on it was like, cube-shaped pillows are so stupid. Why would you need that? And then people try it and they're like, oh, that's actually pretty great. And it just takes time. And so that bell curve, again, you have that adoption curve.
Yeah.
And Kizik is like, dude, their team is so great. I mean, they're just phenomenal. But it was really interesting to see that shift. And it take a while for people to gravitate towards that idea, accept that idea. And it's something that entrepreneur, it's, I think, reassuring that it's like, you can see something like Kizik, which now feels, I think they're having an amazing moment. And it feels like an overnight success.
Yeah.
It's like, only took 10 years of hard work and dedication.
I'm blown away by Kizik. I mean, it feels like a more sustainable, like Allbirds. Remember when Allbirds were really popular? But there was no kind of real reason why Allbirds was as popular as it was. Like they were like comfortable, but they were still shoes. You still had to tie them. Yeah. What a nuisance that is.
Yeah.
Right? And with Kizik, it's just like...
and again, they had an innovation that's just genius. I mean, it was really like an amazing vision that Mike Pratt had way back in the Ogio days of like, hey, I have an idea that I think is pretty revolutionary, and stuck with it for freaking forever. I mean, that's what's hard, and that's every business. They're not like, it wasn't because they were slow. It was just takes a long time to change an industry and change how things work.
They're great with design and colors and like really like going after like what people like. Their one is like a version of like the Yeezys, but now you get that type of a shoe without any of like the baggage attached to that, right? Yeah. Like it's quite fascinating. All right. What's next for Creatably? How long are you going to keep doing this?
I think Creatably just keeps changing and optimizing and improving. We've got tons of cool clients coming on and a lot of fun projects. So I think Creatably will kind of be in that core. That's something that probably is the last thing I'd want to sell, just because it's like that's where all the kind of model is of how we do this, why we do this.
It's the most entrepreneurial, oddly.
Yeah.
Because, the other ones are literally entrepreneurial where you're lunching. But you get to be in a room, with founders and creators and like, how do we build this product and sell it and make it successful? Yeah. That's the funnest thing in the world.
And it's been really, being able to build the brand has allowed me to sit in a really fun spot where I get to talk to founders. I'm like, look, I don't need to pitch you. We're busy. Mm-hmm. But like, this is why I did it, and this is what I've used to build Pillow Cube and these other things. So, if you need that help, but it's been really fun to just kind of leverage that, and Creatably and Pillow Cube just keep going. Stair Slide, we got a bunch of other stuff too. So
I know the products are incredible.
It's super fun.
Well, congrats on everything. Always good to see you, my friend. We'll have you come back, but really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
I appreciate you having me.